So thank you everyone for joining our information session for Parking Day 2023. My name is Kimberly Vaca. I and our Public Space Activation Coordinator here at the District Department of Transportation, or DDOT, and I lead our Parking Day program, which I'll go into what that is if you maybe haven't participated in the past or unfamiliar. We'll be walking through the event guidelines, so how you can participate, where these pop-up activations can go, what materials you can use, how to apply in TOPS, which is our online permitting system. We have a step-by-step guide on our website that walks you through each step of the process. And then at the end, we'll have some time for questions, comments, clarifications. With me today are representatives from our permitting office to answer any permitting questions that I cannot, and then also the Office of Risk Management to go over the insurance requirements, just very briefly, or answer any questions about them. If you're participating in the past, they have not changed, but we do put in some information about those requirements for your awareness. So before I get into the Parking Day overview, I do want to share our website. This is new. It lives on our public space activation. You get here is if you go to DDOT's website, which is ddot.dc.gov, and then you go to the top under projects and programs, you'll see public space activation, and that'll take you here. This is where we house all of our public space activation programs, such as streeteries or sidewalk cafes, arts in the right of way. But what we'll be discussing today is Parking Day. And so all of the materials that I will be referencing, including this presentation, both the event guidelines and the TOPS application guidelines. We have a template for you to download to develop a site plan, and then the insurance provisions are all located here for your use, as well as my contact information, an email here, and then any other important deadlines. We'll also be posting once you receive the applications, a map that we do every year that we promote your locations to the community to encourage people to come visit and sit in your pop-up parklet spaces. So this really is the go-to shop for Parking Day. But back to the presentation. Let me make this big screen. So what is Parking Day? This is an annual event that did not start in DC, but is held on the third Friday of September across the US and abroad. It allows for the temporary transformation of on-street parking spaces, so in the road, to pop-up parks for people to gather and sit and enjoy being in a space that no longer is temporarily storing someone's private car. This began actually in San Francisco back in 2005 as a form of protest to how much space that cities dedicated to vehicles rather than to people. A group of residents who lived there put some quarters in the parking meter, brought materials, and turned it into a mini park. And because of that protest, we now have popularized this and formalized it and allow anyone really to do the same thing here in DC. So while this is temporary, it is a one-day event, not the long-term maybe streeteries or parklets that you've seen throughout the city. The image that this offers has lasting effects and helps us shift the way public space is perceived and utilized. I will say that I think this program, we've been doing this now for over 10 years, has had an impact on DC by us now doing parklets and streeteries. Those are really the formal manifestation of this tactical event. So for this year, we are in line with the third Friday of September. We'll be hosting Parking Day on Friday, September 15th from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you participated maybe a few years back, we used to cap the event at 4, but we extended it at the request of many community members who asked for this to go into the evening. Since it's on a Friday, many businesses like to do happy hours or do late events once people get off work. And so you can participate for all of that time or some of that time for your specific parklet. So what are the event guidelines? There are a few. All of this is in the guidelines on the website, but I've consolidated it into a PowerPoint format. But essentially, these must be on a metered street. So while you're looking for eligible spaces, ensure that it's on these are typically mixed use commercial neighborhoods with meters. The spaces should be mid-block, meaning they should not be at the end of a street. They first and last parking spaces on a block are not eligible unless there's a built-in curb bump out. So sometimes you see the curb extend outward at an intersection. And if you have a location you want me to check out, I'm happy to walk through whether it'd be eligible or not. But typically they should be in the middle of the block. And that helps with safety reasons. Also, streets that have time of day restrictions are not eligible. So if it's on rush hour parking streets, these are not eligible for pop-up parklet, and that's because of the day, there'll be a travel lane. And so we don't want people driving where you will be having your pop-up parklet. And you'll be able to see from the materials, we are not requiring you to put out heavy-duty barriers. These are very, very tactical measures. So they would not necessarily protect you from a vehicle. So this is why these are very specific locations. Other locations that aren't eligible are those that are adjacent to a streetcar. And ultimately, we have the final approval to deny location if another reason creates conflict. So make sure to look for those metered parking spaces. But generally, there are thousands of potential opportunities to participate that meet this criteria. So some general activity guidelines are no commerce or overt advertising can occur in the park. This is public space, right? So we need to maintain it as such. The activities that you're proposing to include need to be confined into the parking space itself. So not extending further into the road or into other parking spaces, or even on blocking the sidewalk, which sometimes we have seen in the past. And this space needs to be attended at all times. So make sure you have at least 2 people manning the area so that if you need to use the restroom, grab some water, you have someone else who can be in that space. Make sure that it's not empty. And then at all times, just in case anyone has questions who's walking by, make sure you keep your copy of your approved permit and your site plan on hand so that if anyone has questions, you can show that you're approved by us at DDOT and it is a sanctioned use that you're doing. We do coordinate with MPD and make them aware, but just in case for some reason there's a rogue officer during the day, you can have your documents and show that you're approved. For the site design, we have some requirements for the barriers and buffers that you're allowed to use. So the barrier really has a lot of flexibility in what we allow. This could be potted plants, fences, railings, boxes, pallets, milk crates, traffic cones or poles, straw bales, or any other element that meets our requirements for location and size. The barrier must be continuous and cannot have any gaps in it. So if you do use cones or any sort of vertical element, you can just string it together with rope, bungee cords, change, tape, or some sort of other similar item. You can see down here they use a streamer to connect their various different elements that are in the parking space. And the height requirements should at least be 1 foot tall, but no taller than 5 feet. And those should be used selectively. Typically, we like to see around 3 feet for height, but feel free to let me know if you have any specific materials or items you want to use, and I can brainstorm whether they'd be feasible or not. So that gives you a lot of options to kind of look through your apartments, look through your storage units or your materials, maybe go to Home Depot and pick some things up. General note for the location of those barriers: they must be surrounded by a 2-foot buffer that separates the parking space from the travel lane. So where the parking space starts, measure 2 feet in, and that's where your barrier begins. Typically, for your awareness, our parking spaces are 8 feet wide. Generally, there's some exceptions to that. So that would give you 6 feet of space to play with for your pop-up activation. The space before your parklet also must be occupied by a parked vehicle or another large item that serves as a safety barrier. So if you have a bike rack, large crates, large planters, or if the roadway already includes a curb bump out, that would suffice for the protection. So you don't need a car, but if you have one, that is the easiest way to block that space. But you cannot use anything that might be construed as seating or gathering spaces like chairs, benches, or tables. We don't want people occupying that space. It's purely for buffering from adjacent vehicles. You can also you're not tied down to using just one parking space. If you want to use 2 or 3, as long as they're meeting the location requirements that we just talked through on the previous slide, they would work. So you can have more than one parking space for your Parking Day pop-up parklet. An example or template of what we're looking for that you would need to submit, and this is posted on our website that I showed you, is shown here. You would insert the address of your location, and then the 2-foot buffer is already included. And then you would basically draw in the barriers that you're proposing, description of those barriers, and then draw in anything else that you're proposing to have in that space. Here is where you would park your vehicle or put your other barrier item. And so make sure you describe what that item is so that we know what you're using to block your pop-up parking space. But otherwise, this is, because it's very low key, it's not professionally stamped and signed by an engineer. That's totally okay. You can use this template and just fill in the gaps that are missing. Okay, so I do want to do a brief quiz to showcase what is the correct type of activation that you can do that meets our criteria. So we have 2 different activations that we've seen in the past, not to shame anybody, but I do want to show what is the correct version and what is not meeting our guidelines. So on the left here, these are more of a actual activation. They're doing a pop-up chess game, which is very cool. I would highly recommend doing something similar. It's very fun. And then on the right, we have outdoor seating for people to dine. Both are approved uses, different opportunities that you can use, but the one on the left is not per our guidelines for several reasons. The first is that you can see their cones are directly adjacent to the travel lane, meaning that they're not building in that 2-foot buffer. So they'll need to move those cones in 2 feet, and then they'd be compliant. Additionally, the posts are more than 2 feet apart from each other. So they need to get more of these cones to bring them closer together. They're also not linked by a rope or other similar items. You can see here on the picture on the left, the cones are placed 2 feet apart and they have a streamer that connects them so that it's a continuous space. And that's really to discourage people from walking from your parking activation just into the road. You'd be surprised what people do. This happens quite a bit. So those are the 3 main issues with the one on the left. Otherwise, it's a perfectly good Parking Day activation and something that we could support. So some other pictures from past events that I wanted to share that may spark inspiration if you're trying to figure out what you want to do. We've had a wide variety of different materials, different activations, from people bringing out a lot of plants and making it into like a garden serene space, to someone did a dog rough, what do they call it, like a rough park where you can bring your dog and do little obstacles in there with some seating. We've had some people do mini golf. This is using this is one of our more extensive pop-up parklets. You can see they built something out of crates, which is really cool. This up on the top right was actually a clothes swap. So they had mirrors, and over here, which you can kind of see different groups of clothes and shoes that people could just take for free, and that people dropped off to donate that morning. So there are really a lot of different opportunities to showcase your organizations, your work, and activate this space. The checklist now that you'll need to provide as part of your application includes these 4 items, which is your concept. So the description of the location of your park and why it's eligible based on the criteria that we talked about before. A written description of how you'll be using that space. So is it for tables and chairs, for seating? Are you doing an art activation? Are you doing a yoga class, right? How are you using that space throughout the day? The types of materials that you'll be using, and then noting that the park must have a continuous barrier. And then your site design is that template, that PowerPoint template that I just showcased. So again, showing the address, a sketch of your description of your concept so that we can visually see how it will be laid out. And then also how you'll be filling in that parking space before your park to block your pop-up parklet. You'll also need to sign a parking day release form, which is included in our materials on our website, and then show proof of general liability insurance, naming the government of the District of Columbia as an additional insured, and it shall contain a waiver of subrogation. So the Office of Risk Management handles the insurance requirements for this. Robert Preston is our point of contact generally, so he would be able to answer any questions about the insurance requirements. So anything about that can be directed towards him. Once you have those 4 documents, you would apply in TOPS, which I'll go through next, and then make sure you email me, the parking day coordinator, with your tracking number so that I can track that permit and then coordinate with the technician so that we're all making sure that the permit gets processed on time and that we're aware that you submitted. So this is the insurance requirements, generally speaking. I'm not sure if Robert or a representative from ORM is on at the moment, because I can't see people.
Hi, Kimberly. Yeah.
Hi. Great. Yes. Do you mind speaking to this really quickly for the group?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity. So again, my name is Robert Preston. I'm the insurance program administrator here for the district officers management. And the insurance requirements for those of you who've participated, as Kimberly said before, are the same. So there are no changes in that. For those of you who are first-time participants or like to be, they're pretty minimal. In terms of limits, the per occurrence requirement's only 500,000. The aggregate's $1 million. If you're an individual, we can work with you based on what you have. But if you're an organization, it should be pretty easy. You should already have that in place. Pretty standard is that we just require that the government of the District of Columbia is the certificate holder, and the address on that can be either to DDOT Public Space Administration or to the Officers Management. Also, we need to be named as additional insured, and there needs to be a waiver of subrogation in place. And I know that all sounds daunting for someone who may not have insurance experience, but your agent or your broker, whoever you work with, will know what that is, and it's a quick and easy addition to do. If you would like us to review it before you submit it to TOPS, which is where we ultimately will review compliance on this piece, you feel free to email us at ORM, so Office of Risk Management, orm.insurance@dc.gov. And just reference in your subject line parking day, and we'll be happy to look at that. My colleague Rashawn Evans, who's on here, he'll be handling that piece in terms of compliance. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us at orm.insurance@dc.gov. I'm happy to answer any questions concerning the insurance requirements.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, sorry. And here's an example of the certificate of insurance that is typically submitted.
Yeah, we just wanted to give everybody an idea of what it should look like. So there you are.
Great. Thank you. Okay, now shifting over to TOPS, which we've mentioned a few times. For those of you who are familiar with TOPS, this isn't the same system. We created this guide to hopefully make it a little bit simpler. If you're not familiar with TOPS, you'll need to create a username and an account. It's relatively painless at tops.ddot.dc.gov. We do this information session now in June to give you 2 months to figure out how your design, where you want to place it, and then apply in TOPS. So hopefully that should give you enough time to get all these documents in a row and then get in the system. So I'm not going to be going through every step on our TOPS application guidelines, but I do want to highlight some important ones that have additional notes. So step 3 talks about the specific permit type that you need. This is an occupancy permit because you're occupying public space for the day, and this is an other special event occupancy permit. Do not apply for a parklet permit because this will trigger a more rigorous review that is not intended for parking day right? This will have more reviewers on it, a different lens that they're looking for documents that you need. So it'll create a lot of confusion on your end and their end. So make sure you apply for an other special event permit and that you note in the description, parking day 2023. That'll let the technician know that that's what this application is for. So you can see a picture of the website here. You'll go to apply for temporary occupancy permits, and that'll give you the other special events button down here at the bottom. Shooting ahead a few more steps, the parking location. So wherever your proposal is, you'll enter the closest street address for your pop-up parklet. We recognize it's not on private property, but that gives us a point of reference of where that parking space is adjacent to a building. So, and then in the description, they'll also give you space where you can describe the actual location along the curb. So if you're in multiple spaces or multiple addresses, you can write down, where this location is. If you are proposing to do multiple pop-up parklets, applause to you. But you'll need 2 different applications or however many you're proposing to do. Each location needs their own permit because they'll have different addresses and different permits associated with them. When you select the dates and hours, you cannot change the date and location once you pass that page. So make sure to have 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. as the start and end time. Or if you want to do a smaller portion of time, you can use that. But those should be your beginning and end time. If it's incorrect, you'll need to start again and resubmit a new application. So make sure to double check, triple check what you're putting into TOPS. For the parking meters, there's been some confusion in the past as to what is the parking meter number. It is not this number here. It is this 8-digit meter ID that's located on the physical parking meter. If you can't figure out what the parking meter is, let us know and we can help you determine the right parking meter space. But you will not reach this page if you did not select a location with a meter. So make sure that your space is in a metered parking space. That's the way that we can check. And then it'll be, like I said, the 8-digit number and not the 5-digit one. So make sure you're gathering the right numbers when you're out surveying your specific location. For steps 8, 11, and 12, make sure to select no for all of those steps. If you select yes, that'll trigger a more rigorous review. It'll include additional departments and divisions that don't need to be on this permit. And that's automatic once you select yes. So for those applications, make sure to select no. And then for step 13, this is where you upload those documents we talked about before, your park concept, your site design, your parking day release form, and then your certificate of liability insurance. These should be uploaded as separate documents. There'll be an upload button for each type, and then as a single PDF. So PDF all of your documents. Make sure to hit the upload document after you select it on the screen. Sometimes people think that it's uploaded, but it's not. It'll show it on the screen and then upload it. You cannot submit documents in person. They need to be submitted online. So there are computers at library or even I believe at our permitting office. Correct me if I'm wrong, PSRD staff, if that's not true. But either way, you cannot submit it in person. And then for step 15, the permitting owner information, make sure, as I mentioned before, that you're putting in parking day 2023 for the event name, and then your contact information as the applicant for that specific permit. This lets us know that your proposal is not for some other special event, that you're doing a festival, right? This is only for parking day for this year. And lastly, email me. So when you're done, you'll get a tracking number. That's the check. That's how you, that's your permit number that'll eventually you'll need to know to access your permit again once it's been issued. And you can print your permit with that number. You'll also need to save that number so that once it's issued, you'll need to print out emergency no parking signs and post them 24 hours in advance of the event, and they'll need to be posted, take pictures, and then send them to DPW to confirm. The process for that is on the back of those signs. And our TOPS website will give you the multiple locations that you can go to print out those emergency no parking signs, but they cannot be printed at home. They are in special paper that's quite large. So you'll need to go to those approved locations to print them out. You can come to our main office at 1100 4th Street Southwest. It's not the only location to get your emergency no parking signs. And then basically what the permit will allow you to do is occupy spaces on that Friday from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if anyone is parked in those locations, DPW, because you have those signs up, will know to tow any vehicles. It always happens. There's at least one location a year where someone left their car there and didn't follow the signs. And so we coordinate with DPW to make sure that those parking spaces are clear. So if you do have a parking day parklet and there's a car there, I will be giving you all the instructions prior to the event with my phone number, so you can call me and then we'll send DPW to your location. But you need to have the permit, and you need to have the EMP signs. Hi, Lauren, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just want to expound on the signage part. Once you post your signage, you should have to post those signs at least 24 hours in advance prior to the effective start date of your permit. In the event someone parks in that reserved space, we ask that you call Department of Public Works Parking Enforcement Division at least 1 hour before your permit becomes effective. So a lot of times people will get to their location early so they can set up, but DPW needs at least 1 hour to respond and get a unit to their location to remove vehicles.
Thank you. Yeah, that is helpful. So while you can't occupy the space until 9, it is helpful to get there early so you can assess the scene and make sure that your space is clear. But they will have a list of all your locations, all the approved locations prior to the event, so that they're aware of where the potential conflicts may occur. And that's it. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to questions from the group. And I'm even happy to walk through any potential locations if you have something in mind, and we can look at whether it'd be eligible or not. I think that could be a helpful way for people to see what works and what doesn't.
Kimberly, I see there's a question in the chat from Leslie Conroy. It says, let me just read it to you. Is there a requirement for who is the permittee or applicant? For example, can an organization not affiliated with the adjacent property apply?
Great question. Okay, I'm going to pull up the guidelines. So you can see the document here. Okay. And yes, pull this up, sorry. So any resident, any business, any community organization is eligible to apply. You do not need to be the owner of the adjacent property. It just needs to be a metered parking space. So you do not need to be you do not need to be associated with the property adjacent to the location. It's helpful to maybe let them know that this is coming and you're interested, or maybe even partner with them, but it is not a requirement. So you can be a resident, you can be a business, you can be a community organization, any of the above. You're welcome.
Kimberly, I'm going to jump in if you can hear me.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, thanks for hosting this information session. Working over in Capitol Hill on 8th Street, we have nothing but 45-degree angle reverse in parking spaces. I don't think that you mentioned whether or not these are spaces that we can put a parklet in.
They are. They are eligible so long as they're metered, which I believe that they are.
They are.
Great. So yeah, you can use it. Just make sure you follow those same guidelines with the 2-foot buffer from the travel lane, but that gives you a lot more space to play in with those parking spaces.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks, Greer, for putting the locations of where to print the signs in the chat. That's so helpful.
Hey, Kim, I actually do have a question.
Yes.
If the permittee must be the individual who holds the insurance, how do we manage that on the public space regulation side if it's an organization and an individual's name is on the insurance? Because we've got permittees, we have applicants, we have owners, all on a permit. So if an organization, yeah, sorry, Robert.
Yeah, Greer. So generally, I mean, we just look at whoever the applicant is in the top section, right? And that's who we compare with. So who's ever named the permits issued, I suppose that's what we're looking for. And we can talk about that offline. Generally, we haven't had an issue in the past, but you know, if that question does come up, feel free to forward it to us, and we'll look at it.
Thank you. I just want to make sure my texts are clear. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But we can talk about it offline. But generally, it hasn't been an issue in the past.
Hi, Michelle. I see your hand up.
Oh, great. Hi, Kimberly. So because we have a lot of streeteries in Logan Circle, I'm thinking parking might not be the most popular, but I'm wondering whether we could use existing streeteries, and do we need a permit for that?
Yeah, so you can use your existing streetery for parking day. You already have theoretically all of the materials there, right? That would comply with this. They're just more rigorous because they're actual structures. And if you want to have those locations participate in parking day, let me know which locations you'd like, and then we can help promote it on our map.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
No problem. They're like the long-term parking day parklets.
Exactly.
All right, any other questions? Okay. Well, I do want to thank you for coming. I'm really excited to see what you put together. Feel free to send me any locations, documents, design concepts that you have before you submit it into TOPS if you'd like to just make sure that you're going in the right direction. But the permit window will start in July. So that's within the next, what is that, week plus. So there's some time to get your things together, and then the end of August is when the permit window closes, and that'll give the reviewers such as myself and the others on the permit like Robert and Lauren to have enough time to process your permit prior to the event later in September. So any questions, feel free to email me, but otherwise enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll post the presentation on our website. Thank you so much.
Thank you.